for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome to this video with me here today. This will actually be an add-on or an additional video to the 8A Gateway video that I already shared with all of you. It's a Lion's Gate, and it's not actually a portal, it's a gateway. What does this mean? We've talked about it, right? Gateway is an opening. It's like a stellar highway or a stellar opening that aligns us with the new calculations or the new reference points that are necessary for us to move ahead, especially, of course, for those of us on the Illumined Light being, Starborn being, Ascension, Illumined Ascension journey pathway. So we've talked about the split, how it's occurring, and some of the difficulties, especially for the Illumined counterparts, as well as any other twin counterparts that are trying to access these gates, of the new through this star gateway. So they're trying to create an inner alignment and refinement of this journey. I want to talk about today this understanding that this is something we're moving through because it's an opening. Portal activity is much different. As you know, we say, well, we have a portal weather and energy opens up for a few quick brief moments, like sometimes even seconds, sometimes it's nanoseconds. It depends what kind of light frequency intelligence we're accessing this perspective from. But a gateway is a particular energetic highway that is open and unlocked for a specific time. And especially for the time being within the passing of these two lunations, the new moon in Leo from the new moon in Virgo, there will be a tremendous set of opportunities for our current evolutionary pathway growth and expansion. Because of that, although I said that due to my current life circumstances and conditions, I won't be doing my Patreon work, I was guided today to actually record, and I did 2 extensive video readings with channeled information. We tuned into the spirit of life, and so I did 2 videos, first one for Illumined Union guidance and the second one for the galactic guidance. So the second and third tier level, if you will access my Patreon page information called Illumined Ascension, and all the links, as you know, are always down below. The information coming through was very specific in alignment of this Illumined Union journey and what are some of the things for us to be careful about and needing to still process and integrate through our inner internalization of life force understanding, because there's sometimes still a very narrow perspective within our framework of humanness, through which, of course, because it's so narrowed or watered down, we can't access higher light intelligences. In the previous videos shared here on YouTube, I've talked about illumined being awakenings and beings who are starting to have their first awakenings into the realm of illumined beings and accessing themselves as illuminating being. Okay, and this is not something that just happens automatically. This is nothing that just automatically you, by having that desire, it will occur for you, because as I've talked about this many times before, it's God and illumined beings who serve the divine plan that know when you're ready. And being ready is not just in willingness, that's just the first step, but it also corresponds majorly, right, with the level of the work you've already been performing through liquid light quotient, infusion, and integration. What came out through the readings, particularly today, was this unfolding again of the masculine and feminine polarity journeys. But what came through the galactic reading specifically was very intense because it still showed a major influence of what we call the devil, or the realm of darkness that influences this journey of union through an overlaying procedure through which we can't really see clearly. And it showed an image of beings who are somehow existing or coexisting in these spiritual positions or jobs or even interests, right? That they somehow look and feel to be spiritual, but behind them is still a high leverage point of dark control. And it's a system that doesn't self-regulate and self-maintain, but is maintained through the beliefs of the inception that the dark is somehow performing and willingly putting on a platter, right, to all those beings who still somehow haven't taken full charge over their bodies. The reading specifically talked about how the feminine already went through the gateway. I'm talking about the fully awakened Christ, the feminine polarity expression. And specifically, of course, that relates also with our gender polarities, right? And the way we kind of, embody them at this point through our body, right? And where we are is in these body avatar suits. And it showed that the feminine already went through this integration of this timeless now moment perspective, which is knowing that the body is the one that guides the ascension movement forward, because it's guided through spirit or the impulses of life force that come directly from God or the illumined consciousness that's bringing these impulses of light directly, not through the mind, but somehow this tool of the mind that's been heavily influenced and overworked in this realm, in this matrix, is an interceptory or intermediary force that discharges a distortion, a constant level of disinformation and distortion. So these divine intelligently guided impulses will be distorted, and you're no longer going to read them properly or correctly in a correct manner. But in a nutshell, you will also start defending them. And the reason why humans who are very specifically still entrenched in this consciousness, why they're defending these belief patterns, because they have a high level of being convinced that these are actually programs of the light. So a being such as any one of us, myself, yourself, what truly makes the difference here is having that epiphany of illumination. It's having your own individual illumined awakening. But, when you look at it that way, it's not as simple, right? Because imagine it like that. There's beings who are still heavily influenced and controlled by the dark and dark forces. So even if their soul is very willing to shift and it wants to do everything to move that individual through their human incarnation along the path of awakening and ascension, they're still so heavily influenced by the dark that it's very hard for them to move through, right? Through the energy expression that's all around them that influences their day-to-day life and activities, right? So any amount of soul desire and willingness will always be sabotaged by the human counterpart, right? So it's kind of like that desire of the soul, the longing of the soul to shift and move forward, but the unwillingness on the level of the human counterpart, which is the embodied aspect, because that embodied aspect is still so controlled and heavily influenced. So this today was showed by the archetype of the cage, which is, a lot of people who have been accessing the realm of spirituality, because this is those of us here somehow in any way, shape, or form you are spiritually inclined. But in most cases, what Spirit revealed that to be is still heavily influenced by the dark forces. And it's not at this truest core fundamental principle, something you're doing, performing, having an interest over. It's not necessarily that something that you've created a business around or whatever, but it's something that's heavily influencing you through that spiritual belief system, because that spiritually belief system is still being influenced by the inception of the dark, but it's so well hidden and so well calculated that the majority of the beings that haven't yet created the pathway of the spiral of cleansing those lower human tendencies, they cannot see. And this is what's keeping them stagnant. So this is all, or was all, revealed in the readings, and how to work around it, and the guidance of what we need to see, what we need to move, and what the masculine actually is experiencing. It was shown almost like this baptism and this ritual of total surrender, because only when the masculine surrenders fully, they can come and join the feminine in that equal balance, that equal give and take. They can become divine equals, which in a nutshell is the only way of expressing their divine union as one, right? When the polarity is existing in its state of equanimity and divine reciprocity. Okay? The reason why this is really, really so difficult is because it's so well skilled in the way the darkness kind of keeps that hidden. So what I experienced yesterday was actually a very, very heavy unleashing and discharging of the dark, because as I've shared with you before, a strong dominant part of my path of the last few years has been a venting out of the dark. So me as a child of Aurea, serving as the illumined body avatar to unleash forces of the dark. So when these forces were released through my body, they were able to be released into the light because of the level of my integrity and understanding of what is the dark, what is the light. When you have no such understanding, you can easily mistaken or misplace the two. And don't beat yourself for it, because let me tell you, it's really difficult at this point to sometimes discern between light and the false light, because the dark has learned to mimic the light very diligently, very skillfully. But it isn't until you truly understand what divine law is and what the trinity of life is, that that trinity in itself is your savior. And that savior is the God, and it's the fundamental principle of that God within you as the Christ-born child, right? The mother, father, and the child. That once you get to really plug into that, really embody it, it will be your ultimate filtration system for that which is an infiltration. Which literally, if I translate that sentence, it means that it will be your natural divine intelligence that's organic, that will naturally make you feel the difference between the light that presents truly as the light and the light that is dark, but it presents as false light. And it's kind of like you're starting to learn to read these impulses. And the reason why you can't read those impulses is because you haven't really plugged into what the lumen light is like. And you never had an illumined epiphany or an illumined awakening, such as I described recently. Someone in my group had and experienced, and how it's different to any type of what we call a spiritual awakening. Okay, so this gateway has a strong hold in us holding space for those aspects, as I've explained already, that are still in this transition mode, that are in this transitional space. Because of that, a lot of us who are somehow or have during this pathway through our human selves built any type or form of relationship or relational experience based on, even if it's just a slight percentage, but it was based on codependency. And codependency is not necessarily when you're attached to someone because you think they're your means to survival or of survival, or you can't be alone. Even fully independent beings can have these latching on, what's it called? These tentacles, right? That are energetic cords, kind of plugged into those beings that are somehow still in between, and somehow through those cords are able to drink from our life force because they haven't really found their own fountain of life yet. So a lot of us have, in a way, as I've been reading into this energy, sacrificed or self-sacrifice for these individuals and helping them to hold the space, because if we somehow didn't connect to them through building those temporary attachments, these beings would not even stand a chance in making that passageway, because these beings were at the more minimum level of light quotient integration in their lifetime on this path, right? They were perhaps even very spiritually inclined individuals, but that in the eyes of God doesn't matter, because the only thing that matters is how much you actually embody and how much of the total trust, surrender, and faith in God you have as an illumined being. Okay, so there's like levels of that, and we've somehow built those temporary bonds with these soul type individuals that were very much deeply in the trenches of the dark, like I said, like latching on and having a firm grip over these individuals because they haven't managed to gather enough light quotient to pull themselves through or be pulled through. Especially for this gateway. This gateway is, as I've explained in the channelings on Patreon, and you can access it at any time you want, at your own will and comfort. It's like, it's specifically inclined towards regeneration and replenishment of the beings who are the first triads, or the first primaries, which I once explained to you as the creation pillars, gatekeepers, and light emissaries. And today in the Patreon videos, I explain how light workers are not the same as light emissaries, because these beings are not earthly bound beings, while light workers are usually earth souls who have built a bond or started opening themselves spiritually to the workings and performing of original encodings of the light. Okay, but this triad has become very depleted on this planet because of the tremendous amount of work that it constantly needed to do and perform, because it was getting more and more difficult, as I already explained in the previous video segment. So if you watch that, You don't need me to explain that here, so just watch all the videos. There's 3 segments, right? First is Aurea's crucifixion and God's victory and glory. Second one is the 8-8 gateway video information about the urgent timeline shift for ascension. And this third video particularly is more essential in terms of the karmic release. Okay, so these conditions, these bonds that were formulated in between these individuals were temporary agreements based on increased opportunity or possibilities for these souls to shift. And each and every one of us who's very strong in our embodiment of the light, not just in our awareness, but especially in our embodiment of the light, because it's not enough for us to be aware of the light. Through the level and means of my work, I've met many, many individuals, but very few I've met that were actually embodied within the light, not just aware of the light and very spiritually inclined. That's one thing, right? Very few who were, as we say, actions, demonstration of light meets the belief system and matches with the internalization that is, the acceptance of that light. So you first have to accept it, and then you need to work towards embodying it. I've been talking about this for years, so I won't go into repeating that. So all those who are very strong and prominent in that embodiment of light, we somehow agreed to act as an agent of change to help carry those. It's almost like you tell someone, well, hop on my wings and I'll help carry you forward. And we've each built such alliances that for us were very heavy, because in a way, because these beings also had tremendous amount of venom. And when I say venom, it doesn't mean it comes from them, but it comes from the workings of the dark that during their many lifetimes they've been drinking in and accepting as, experiencing deception, being deceived, being manipulated in through lots and lots of hoaxes and levels of transgression, which, like I said, don't beat yourself for it, because the darkness is very skilled in orchestrating that so that no human can actually see how vicious it actually is, and that it's not absolutely of the light. Because the light does not work in that way at all. The light doesn't want you to toil around hours and hours, days and days, constantly just to earn a specific amount of self-confidence and self-entitlement. When you're truly a being of illumined light and pursuing this path, you're just simply an agent of life. And you know life to be fluid and a constant agent of change. Like, life has to have one simple principle, which is the principle of flow. And when you're in a flow state, you're naturally constantly accepting more and more life into you. And when you accept more life into you, your liquid light quotient grows and expands. That's where you're getting stronger in your embodiment of spirit, not just knowing spirit and accepting spirit, but accepting spirit in your body. So these beings who are very strong and prominent, we've acted as these, not just catalysts for these souls, but agents of transference, kind of like helping them. And what I've experienced is it's very hard, even if you're a very independent being, we kind of, for the time being, we've kind of created through these alliances, these temporary agreements, a strong sense of affinity or affiliation with the other or with one another, which created the sense of our energies always flowing between the two. It doesn't mean you need to be in contact or constantly exchanging, but the energy is always flowing from one to the other, which is difficult because even when you're alone, you don't always feel like alone. You feel that energy of that being is always there with you, and it's sometimes difficult. It's almost like being a mentor to someone who's not really seeking mentorship, because it was a soul-based agreement and it's not like done or performed through or per individual. It's like soul to soul. But if you're an awakened one, if you're fully consciously present, you would still feel that energy like always with you and always around you. And it's difficult because you can't really cut it off. You can cut it out. You can ask, beg, plead with God. But the thing is, as I've shared about this gateway, is that God will have its final word. There's something about the nature of God that none of us still here fully understand. And this ultimate surrender means that whatever we're still fighting, like we're resisting it, we're resisting a pulse, we're resisting a pull, we're resisting a magnetic association, we're resisting something, because if we don't know the meaning of it, we need to resist it, because if I can't intellectualize it, it doesn't exist. It's not real, so I have to escape it, right? Here, it's the opposite. The consciousness of God and the total Christed trust, right, is a path of that mastery and just accepting it, just going with the flow. And if something's there present, don't analyze it, just just be with it, just love it, accept it. It's just somehow there around your field for a reason. You don't have to understand it, because this last part, especially for those of us who are most advanced on this path, it will require total courage and willingness to trust God, like absolutely. Even if we were very independent beings before, we're learning to be more interdependent with God as humans. Because even though as powerful spirits, we might be very interdependent, because you have to know light beings are not independent beings, they're interdependent beings. They know how to work around the intelligent web of life, because they understand, they're unified. There's a principle of unity always present in this life and creation. Only humans self-isolate and self-deprecate and become very powerful as individuals. As a light being, you can be powerful only as an individual aspect or a spirit being. You actually formulate your power through interdependence. But most humans haven't learned this quality yet, because they still haven't mastered their own independence. Because as you know, darkness has kept so many souls in constant codependency. So it's like this growth of spirit is moving souls here through their ascending journey from being codependent to then independent and then interdependent, which is what the state of illumined union is like and all about. So when you're a very powerful independent being, that in itself is not enough. And you're learning how to offer your life force in sacrificial service to the divine in ways that are well over the skills of your mind or mental capacities, which you well know in this matrix prison, our minds are being heavily influenced by heavy frequencies, constant interruptions, intrusions, and, you know, things that are just not really feeding within the web of life. They're not pro-life. So what I actually experienced yesterday was a very difficult day, you know, on gateway days, like specific dates, I never experienced things like, wow, you know, woohoo, what an energy. It's always very heavy for me, because so much darkness is being unleashed, and I experienced tremendous transgression pain again, and just difficulty in my body. I was actually lying in my bed for a whole day and night, and I didn't do that for, I don't know, many, many months. And it was almost like my body forced me, because I couldn't do anything. I got really weak. I just saw and felt how much energy space I'm holding again at the collective level, and I just accepted it. And we had very stormy weather here, constant lightnings, and when I looked towards the highest Alp here, just like the view, just like, you know, behind me, there's a view of our highest mountain peak there, and there was all these lightnings in the sky going flashy, like bright and pink and all these colors. So there was lots and lots of frequencies like opening up and energetic associations forming. And whenever this happens, for me, it's very difficult, because the body's trying to process all that information. So I had a restless leg syndrome all night, and I really didn't sleep well, and some nightmares and stuff. And it was just so much being processed through the body, and that's what's happening now. But one thing I want to share is the beautiful thing that throughout the whole day of just lying in bed, I experienced towards the end of the day, when the sun was going down, I laid back in my lounge chair, because it was the only moment without rain. And I just went into my inner vision space, and I actually saw what and she did like this to me, like, come, you know. And the moment I joined her, my high spirit self, it was almost like I found myself in this kind of like, it appeared to be like a spirit library. And there was a specific book, and all this information I was trying to seek at my human counterpart level these last few months. She was showing me that book. You know, the book had a specific name. It was also about a specific person. And I opened up the book, and there was a key word there. And the word was abandonment, right? And I looked up the word, and I finally got it. I was like, oh, yeah, that's what it was about. So in that moment, instantly, I knew the whole story just by looking in that word, abandonment. And I felt the feelings of that being, of that soul, of that person, personality, that, you know, embodiment of that soul. And I saw the whole story. And I saw their abandonment issues. I saw what they had to experience and go through in their family, and the difficulties in their upbringing, and getting those family patterns, you know, and even rooting back to many, many lifetimes. And remember, in the 8A Gateway video, I talked about how these leftovers occurred with each passing ascension, and whenever someone was left behind. So it was almost like I was being shown that at a specific moment of that first separation with these souls who didn't ascend, but they decided instead to go and move and descend, and they started descending, and they started moving into the spheres of denser worlds, and eventually, you know, becoming a part of the earth prism of life. that through time got very heavily distorted and became a prison. And which means a heavily influenced, manipulated realm, right? It's not a realm based on freedom and reciprocity and divine information exchange freely distributed freely amongst all beings that are part of that realm, okay? So I saw like that first division, which I talked about a few months ago, right? When I talked about the galactic family splitting and becoming members of the galactic seed and then the earth seed, right? The star seed and the earth seed as one, of course, but they had experienced different journeys. So I saw like the abandonment for some of these beings that was just shown through this specific individual that I met or I know. But it was also shown this at the higher collective level, right? This abandonment issue doesn't just stem from different childhood wounds or patterns, but for beings on this path who were once a part of this family of light membership. I'm not talking about young souls who have different lifetimes here on earth and different things to learn, which, you know, just forget about that. It's not the same thing. But I'm talking about old souls, but somehow those that got too imprinted and too lost in this earth sphere, no longer knowing why they're here, just living lifetime through lifetime, but not with that full knowing of where they originated from, how they ended up here. They've forgotten about their entire galactic journey, so to say, right? Because you're only fully a master of yourself when you remember your entire galactic journey. And I remembered my galactic journey that summer just before that transgression, which was that summer in 2019. It was like the entire cosmic Christ shown to me. And I remember I channeled that entire course, everything, and then transgression happened. And ever since, I couldn't even share that information with all of you. I've been given little inklings here and there, but not the entire course in totality of its passing and how it was passed on through me and to me. And so there was this abandonment that stemmed from that original cause of that first split. And I was shown how this abandonment was now, with that meeting of that individual, was reenacted. And somehow I, my physical human body self, re-engaged and offered that individual, it was a few chances, like a few gates, a few openings, like just get over that. Not like, no, just get over it, you know, in that strict kind of way. But it was an opportunity given directly through God. You know, when you have that story of the man drowning and asking God for showing assistance, and people came in boats, and he's like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And at the end, the man drowned. And he came up and he met God himself, and God said, well, I sent you this and this and that. But you said no, because you had a false image and understanding of me. I send help in many, many ways and forms. So this is how a lot of these beings actually act or react, because they still have these abandonment issues, which when you contract this wound so much so, eventually becomes a very rigid stance, a very rigid personality, a very stubborn personality, which keeps you very much locked in a lower sense of ego, because we have a higher expression of ego personality and a lower, very dense expression of ego personality, right? So I was shown how there was this reenactment offered a few times so that the being could see and confront that pattern within themselves and move beyond it and finally accept this path of ascending. But they didn't choose it, especially at that time being. And it was very difficult. So because of that, I myself experienced a lot of grieving over that soul and that individual, and things not going through that way because of the free will nature and, you know, things of such and such nature. And yet still God kept telling me, don't worry, you know, I give last chances, but beyond that, I give something else. And as God, I always will find a way to reach even those souls that we believe have been totally abandoned. Well, they believe themselves to be abandoned. And when someone believes to be so abandoned at the root level, I'm not talking about the personality level, because at the personality level, many of these souls actually come out to be very self-confident, and there's nothing wrong in their life, and they have this, you know, self-confidence, but it's actually a false persona. It's a false image shown to the world. Well, inside of themselves, they're really poor and they're suffering because they haven't really surrendered to help, to assistance, to spirit, to union, to friends, to family, to, you know, just having that union experience and just letting go and saying, oh, I'm really so loved. All I have to do is trust. I'm not going to be abandoned this time. It's just a pattern that I keep on replaying since that first original split, but it will end with the moment I choose to end it. So I was shown how this also creates kind of like a heavy expression of the matrix signature within beings who are the ones offering the assistance and help, because they're feeling like being pulled down. And I felt like the energy of the person always there with me, like constantly, like almost sometimes every day. I was like, how can I get rid of it? And I couldn't do much, you know, whatever you could do, it really didn't bring much of that unfolding, didn't bring that release. But I gotten this epiphany from God saying that only God can, you know, how God puts some things together, only God can separate, nothing else. So it's not like we can do that forcefully or by force. It's like a process of that service, and the way ascension goes and the way God offers his, hers, its assistance to every one of these individuals, and how God keeps finding ways to reach those individuals. Okay, and there's never such a thing as a last resort. There will always be something, something, and something more. But what God showed me is that a lot of us who have been feeling the burdens of, you know, not doing enough, God said at this point, you've done more than enough. But even you, as just my cosmic servant, can do much to the point that you tried and you did and you succeeded. But you can't move beyond that point, because beyond that point, you've kind of guided the individual towards me, closer to me. But beyond that point is just what's between me and that individual. It's between me and that soul, which is something that every being has to learn. Otherwise, we bring more karma to ourselves, because we're kind of becoming a part of something that we truly are not. So everything we can truly do is we can help be the guiding principle of life for ourselves and others, but then allow to accept everyone as their own guiding force of life, as their own chosen and choosing sovereign. Even if they choose poorly, even if they choose the dark path, even if they choose to regress, we have to let that go. So yesterday when I did this, I was moved through a very tiny little process. It was kind of like a spiritual ceremony. And I saw myself, and it's like with that interpretation, I saw the individual. And at a certain point, they were just like standstill. And then suddenly when I was there with the energy, just parting ways and saying, I did all I could. Thank you for understanding. I never abandoned you. I never left you. I just had to go. Because Aurea actually told me, she said, you can't do more than explain your reasons. You know, it's like if someone still resents you, if someone still takes it personally and associates it with you, not with what took place way, way back before, it's like they still haven't gotten it. They haven't moved close to God enough to know that you were just a mirror. You were just a reflection. You were not the act of violence or something against Him or defiance in your own. You weren't. It's almost like, you know, if you apologize to someone, if you explain with love, you say, I had to be here. That's why I left, because I had this and that, and this was my path. And if that person still doesn't accept that and still doesn't understand, even if they say they do, but there's a resentment there, because there's always a push and pull. Push and pull energy is always a form of resentment. It's just suppressed form of resentment. It's not always outwardly spoken. So what I was saying, you've done all you can. You can't keep on holding that space and thinking you need to do more. You have to let it go. And the moment I fully said I now fully let go, I felt like arms, like the gripping hands of that individual going like into me, like, no, 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 don't let me go. It was almost like until I was waiting and holding space, the individual was in that status quo position. And the moment I said, well, now I'm really leaving because I've done all I could, there was a firm grip. It was like, no, no, but now don't go. And this is like the case of a lot of these energetic entanglements. When you finally, in the activity of the energy expression, not what you say or you believe yourself to be doing, but you really leave, you leave and you fully let go and let God, the energy of the person will go back and it will try to chase you again, or try to move towards you, because it will feel that fear, because you're no longer energetically there feeding them and sustaining them, but usually sustaining their status quo and where they already are, because they have to make the next stepping stone. They have to make the next step towards God. They have to move closer to God first, not closer to you. And that's what it means to be truly much of a spiritual hermit, the seeker, before you can be the spiritual knower. So you can lead someone to God, but the individual exchange and sacredness of the being and their God self will have to be performed inwardly. And so during that, like, I felt this, and then I just said, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you, I just let you go. And then I saw, like, I felt a beautiful unwinding. And I cannot say that the energy was then no longer with me. It was still there with me. But there was like more of a, I embraced the grieving process more than before. For example, that false hopeful nature is like, no, no, but it will change. It will shift. It will shift. It has to. It will. I know, you know, it's like, it's the mind keeping you in looping. But in the end, you don't know when you really have to fully trust. And that's a part of that general message today here in this video, which is called the karmic release. So you will also know that a lot of, especially in the dynamics between the masculines and the feminines, right? Mostly it's like that, not always, but mostly the pattern is that the masculine is somehow heavily plugged into, with their whole hands gripping into a very dense karmic situation or a karmic person or relationship, while the feminine is attaching to that masculine. That's why the feminine needs to release first, and the feminine needs to fully enter into her interdependent state. Not necessarily independent, because the feminine has mastered that before, but this interdependent state in which she can fully now exist in total divine neutrality, which is an unbiased state of constant love, just outpouring of love. You don't need to know, you don't need to push, you don't need to like seek answers or check someone in or check in energetically, which is a lot of people what they do in these union protocols, right? So usually the moment when the feminine, that's an illumined, enlightened feminine, really lets go, it also helps that masculine to let go of that karmic. But again, it's still a part of the free will. They have to choose. But energetically, it kind of unlocks a lot of space for that potential. Because as long as they're having like energetic sustenance, like food through you, they're getting that supply, they're not going to do anything because they're still safe. They're nurtured in their safe position, but it's not really safe. So in the video readings, there was this description of this intelligent process. It's like a spiritual baptism for the masculine. And if you want to get that, you can just tune into my Patreon, and you can watch at different levels. Level 2 and 3 are for videos. Level 1 is not. But this is what I wanted to share today. It's like really important for those of us who really want to pursue this Illumined Ascension pathway to fully let go on all levels. And know that there's an aspect of us that's fully divine that's helping that. It's beyond that which we can call an attached self. It can't formulate attachments because it's that illumined. And we trust that part of us doing more work than we can see, and it's always happening at the back burner, behind the scenes. And we're gaining more and more trust in that beautiful wisdom through that experience of trusting the nature of our divine self and God, in a nutshell. So that's kind of like where we are now. The gateway will continue. People will be plugging into their own individual timelines, but there's still a sense of urgency, as I already explained. But it has to be accessed through great, great reverence and neutrality at this point. So I hope I was able to bring more to the light. If you have your own meditational tactics and enter these rituals, if you feel like there's constant energy that's returning to you, but you don't want it, just ask God. Just ask God. Say, God, I trust that you know what is naturally inclined to be together and what it's not. And I trust you to know when it's time for something to be released. And then unwind that burden, that like constant yes, no within yourself. And just trust God that it literally knows what it's keeping together, whether it's temporarily or, permanently for beings who are going to come into union. But just trust and surrender that activity that you're kind of resisting because you believe you need to yourself do something about it, but it's constantly like backfiring on you. Or if you're tuning into something but you're constantly getting a no, you're getting a no for a reason. Just unplug. Just truly focus on yourself, because this is what this gateway is about. It's also about recharging and replenishing our divine triad, which is the way we relate to our bodies, the way our bodies relate to the density that is our current density space, because it's always shifting, it's fluid, it's not always permanent. I explained that on Patreon videos as well, so it's all there. I won't go into it here. But again, I want to wish you a beautiful August, the month ahead. Starting tomorrow, I'm finally unplugging. I hope all goes well, keeping my fingers crossed, my fists tight, but also open at the same time. My heart open, my mouth always willing to express the divine word. I hope to be doing new channeled automatic writing sessions that we'll be sharing on Patreon starting next month in September. I'm also scheduling now for September sessions. So some people have already scheduled. I'm not doing personal one-on-one work in August because this is my retreat month. Finally, it's not even going to be a whole month, just a few weeks left. But I will see you in September. You can book at any time via my webpage. The timing is always fluid with my sessions because they're spirit guided. They're not calculated into timetables or, I don't believe in those things. I just function the way I am. And it's the fluidity of spirit which interacts between me and that person, which come into the meeting space and the meeting point that's just personalized between the two of us in spirit. And these sessions are always super powerful. So I hope to be doing more of them in September and to meet some of you in person via those sessions. Some people have asked me. There's 2 types. Check it out on my personal services page on my webpage called Set Up in a Light. But also links are down below, and you can always also use the donate button. And whatever. Support the work, and the work will support you in your own chosen path of ascension and illumined union. Thank you for being here at this time, for listening, for watching the videos, liking them, whatever, which brings them back to its regular flow of activity. And as always, so much love is in power. Take care of yourself, and I will see you soon when divine timing orchestrates that to be so. Bye-bye for now. Take care.